Hello there, everyone. My name is David McLeod, and I am your life mastery coach, author of the wonderful little book, A Life to Die For. I'm also one of the co-authors in the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care, and also lead author on a book that's going to be coming out in October called Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment. Boy, I'll have to learn that title. So that's going to be coming out in October, and I'm really excited about that. Anyway, welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. And this is episode 250. Wow, 250 episodes. That's pretty impressive. We're calling this one today, Calling in Your Compassionate Disruptor. Now, I know that's kind of a quirky title, and you may not have a real clear understanding of what we're talking about, but let me just give you a bit of a summary. In my view, a lot of people seem to like living in the status quo. It isn't that they're afraid of change necessarily. It's just that change often brings with it the discomfort or annoyance of having to adjust to a different set of circumstances. Most of us prefer to be comfortable, so we become decidedly uncomfortable when we have to make these kinds of adjustments. Our known and familiar is being disrupted, which often leads us to believe that we are about to be forced to experience the unknown. And of course, since it is unknown, it triggers fear within us. Now, on the other hand, there are people who seem to thrive on change and who, in fact, like to rock the boat, make waves, and create deliberate disruption. Sometimes it seems that this kind of energy is geared towards bringing about chaos just for the sake of increasing discomfort for others. Indeed, we are seeing a lot of this kind of stuff, apparently undisciplined disruption, happening everywhere in our world today. So what about the middle ground? Certainly there are aspects of life that really could benefit from intentional improvement. And in order to foster this improvement, that is, to bring about the kind of change we truly wish to have, a small amount of disruption kind of becomes necessary, don't you think? Well, for this episode of Life Mastery TV, my good friend and colleague, Gayle Nowak, a highly skilled visibility and emotional wellness coach, is returning to the program to chat with me about what she calls compassionate disruption. So please welcome Gayle back to the show.
Hi, David.
Hello, Gayle. I'm delighted to have you join me again today. You and I, well, every time we get together, we have such great conversations. I just love it. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I want to say congratulations on the upcoming book. That's really exciting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is. It's very exciting. It's one of those things, I've kind of had this dream about getting my own name on the front cover of a book where I am the lead author or the only author, and it becomes a bestseller. And working with Laura DeFranco, that seems like a pretty high probability since she has done it like 80 times now.
Right.
And, so I'm optimistic, but I'm not gonna set my heart on any particular outcome. I'm just trusting that the universe will provide what is supposed to happen. And of course, I know that you and I have talked about doing something, and I would love to have you come participate in one of these joint ventures at some point as well. It would just be so fun working with you in that way.
Yeah. I love our collaborations and the conversations that we have, and I'm so excited to have this one. This is going to be, as always, interesting, fun, hopefully a little provocative and inspirational. That's my intention for today.
Yeah, I think provocative, that's a good word. I think the word disruptor in its own context implies a little bit of provocation, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I as I was listening to your intro and your summary and the comparison of, staying in the status quo and disrupting for disruption's sake, I feel like it might be helpful for those who are tuning in to sort of talk a little bit more about this idea of what exactly is a compassionate disruptor. And that might look different to you than it looks for me. But really, I see a compassionate disruptor as someone who challenges status quo, but really challenges oneself and others with compassion. And it's like with that compassion piece that makes it not disruption for disruption sake. It's really about honoring and validating our unique perspectives, our lived experiences, while inviting people or inviting ourselves into a new way of thinking, a new way of being with sensitivity and love. And I think you can have both. I think you can hold that love and that sensitivity and that compassion, and you can really shake things up at the same time.
Right. This is, to me, the idea of status quo is equivalent to the idea of comfort zone. Really. Status quo just means that's the way we've always done it. That's the way we're going to continue to do it. And we do it because we've been doing it that way, not because there's any sensible reason for doing it that way. And sometimes it requires an uplifting of awareness to the point where you can just really ask yourself, why are we doing this? What is how did we get into this place of doing this thing this way? And how is it really serving us? Is it serving us? Or is it time for us to maybe look at something that could be more beneficial to us? I think part of the problem is, and I've done a lot of work with folks on this whole notion of the comfort zone. Comfort zone can turn into a coffin if you're not careful. Because you stay there in your comfort zone long enough, before you know it, your comfort zone becomes like a couch with a permanent indentation in the center. And, the remote control kind of glued to your hand, and the only functionality you have in your life is to move your thumb to scroll through the channels, really. And nothing about that appeals to me at all. And yet I know that in my own life, I have gotten to that stage by allowing so many other things to just kind of fall away and not be of interest anymore. And the real reason for doing that was I just really didn't want the world to see me as I was. It's all about fear. It's all about stepping out and being seen. And I know you, as a visibility coach, you deal with that all the time. Most people, I think in truth, most people really do want to be seen, but they're afraid of how they're going to be judged or how they're going to be perceived. And that is what holds them back. So I think all of these ideas are tied together. And, the moment I make my mind up to stop hiding in the shadows, in the background, and to step out and be seen, well, that's instantly going to create a disruption, because many people are not going to be happy with that shift. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Visibility is often very much outside our comfort zones. And I agree with you. I think that we all want to be seen. We all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. We want to feel free to show up as ourselves.
Right.
And, I can't say this is 100% true for everybody. A lot of the people that I've worked with, a lot of people that I've spoken to, it doesn't always feel safe to do that. And instead we learn how to appease others. And I want to come back to awareness in a minute. And I also want to address the point about the comfort zone becoming a coffin, because our growth happens outside of our comfort zone. That's how we expand. That's how we evolve. And I think that staying in the comfort zone is a fast track to complacency and call it a coffin if you want.
Right.
And I'm with you. That doesn't necessarily appeal to me. And at the same time, I've also been in that place before too. And I think that that's normal, right? I think that we go through periods of expansion and we kind of have to recalibrate in that expansion. And then suddenly that expansion feels comfortable. It kind of reminds me of a lobster, right? Like as the lobster grows, it sheds its shell. It's got a bigger shell. It grows into that shell. It has to shed the shell again. And it knows to shed the shell when it's feeling uncomfortable. So we can kind of use that discomfort as a signal to help us with our awareness, right? Now, speaking of awareness, awareness is one thing, but awareness doesn't necessarily lead to change. We need action. We need awareness and action in order to have that change. So we can, and I think that we have a lot of awareness in our world right now around a lot of different things. And I notice this personally, but even on a collective scale, there's awareness, and yet there's a lot of being the same as we've been. And that might look like, someone saying, I noticed that I have imposter syndrome, for example. That comes up in visibility coaching a lot. And it's like, I'm noticing that my imposter syndrome, I'm noticing it. And they're still in that overachieving energy, or they're still really uncomfortable being praised, for example, because they're still needing to take the aligned steps to be someone who can own their brilliance, someone who can give themselves grace, for example. So awareness is one thing, but really what I see as the role of the compassionate disruptor, whether you're doing it for yourself or doing it for others, is starting with that awareness and then really getting honest about the impact of that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And making some decisions about, like you said, like, wait, does this, just because we've always done it this way, is this how we want to continue to do it? Like, what do I really want here? And not coming from an internal place, not coming from a place of, well, I really should do it this way because this is what so-and-so is expecting of
right.
me. And that piece, it sounds simple, but actually I think that can be the piece where it starts to get disruptive because we're honoring ourselves, and not everybody's going to like that.
Yeah, so you've said a lot of good stuff here. The first thing I want to come back to is the word safety. Because to me, there's no such thing as safety. Safety is a complete illusion. It simply does not exist. If you think about it, the entire world in which we live is just as it is. There are dangers everywhere, and if you are focused on the danger, guess what? You're going to attract danger into your life. But if you're focused on elevating your own internal energy to a higher level, an energy of love and acceptance and compassion and forgiveness, danger doesn't seem to be quite as prevalent. So what I guess I'm saying is, by elevating my energy, I'm going to translate here something first. Safety, my idea of safety is nothing more than a projection of my own fear onto the world. That's what it is. If I believe it's unsafe out there, it's because I'm feeling fear in here. All right. So if we can acknowledge that and agree with it, say, oh, I notice I'm feeling some fear right now. What is that fear trying to tell me? What is it warning me about? This is when it actually becomes a good idea to listen to the ego mind, because the ego mind is going to have all kinds of stories about that fear. So listen and say, oh, okay, so you're afraid that if I step out and speak my mind, someone is going to yell at me, someone is going to get angry with me, someone is going to maybe even get violent with me. That's what you're afraid of. Now, let's just go back historically and look at all the times that I have ever spoken up. Has any of that ever happened? Well, maybe somebody yelled at me. Maybe someone got angry at me. But the truth is, no one has ever gotten violent with me because I spoke up. So was there really any danger there? Well, not really. It was just my fear of how they were going to react. That's all it ever was. So if as an individual, if I can do that for myself, and that only takes a couple of minutes just to kind of go through that little process, then I can come back to a realization, well, really, there's nothing for me to be afraid of. You know, it's kind of an illusion. It's imaginary. It's not real. It's just that my ego mind is remembering situations before and conglomerating them all into one big blob and saying, hey, if you do that, this is going to happen. This is bad. Don't do it. That's kind of how it happens. So the awareness piece for me is about noticing my own responses to whatever's going on in the world, and then asking myself, is it true? First of all, is there really danger out there? You know, if I can see a bomb coming into my house, I'd say, yep, that's probably dangerous. I probably don't want to be here, right? If I'm in the middle of a road and I see a car coming, yeah, I probably don't want to be staying here. So yeah, there may be some circumstances, pretty rare circumstances, where real danger actually exists. In that case, obviously you have to respond accordingly and do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself and anybody else who might be with you. But 95% of the time, maybe even more, it's all illusion. It's all in the mind. And so if you can just take the time to ask, what is this really about? And then come to some sense of calmness, and then allow yourself to elevate back up into that energy of love. And then you can take your action from that place rather than taking the action from fear. So I think that's how I would summarize what you were saying. And then the whole notion of a comfort zone doesn't even exist anymore, because if all I'm ever doing is looking at what am I afraid of and why is that real fear, and then moving through it, and now coming back to a place of love. As soon as I get to that place of love, it's easy to step out of the comfort zone, right? It's not easy necessarily to get through that mental haze to get there,
right.
But it really is easy if you give yourself the time and the space to do it. I guess that's what I'm saying in way too many words.
I totally appreciate everything that you said, and in particular, giving yourself the time and the space to do it. I understand the phrase, and I think, we have a lot of phrases out there that are verbal shorthand. I understand the intent behind the phrase, feel the fear and do it anyway. And I think that includes everything that you shared, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of times people will take that advice to their detriment, because the fear is telling you something, and
Right.
the fear has a voice too, a voice that wants to be acknowledged. And there may be some really great wisdom in that fear that can help you feel safe, if you want to use that word, right? Maybe perhaps a better word is regulated. That fear is going to actually help you find what you need. It's speaking to a need in that moment. And it can help you find what it is that you need in order to feel that calm, in order to feel that confidence, in order to feel maybe it's not even shifting into calm and confidence. It's shifting from fear into excitement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not ignoring the fear. It's not dismissing the fear. It's not feeling it and doing it anyway, like immediately like that. It's literally what you said, noticing, and maybe even doing, you don't want to necessarily get stuck in the past, but maybe doing a little inventory of like, oh yeah, right. When I spoke up this time, I got yelled at, or I got ignored, and actually, I recognize that that's a pattern for me, and I'm feeling fearful that it's going to happen again, and to have compassion with yourself, right? Like, well, of course I would feel that way. That didn't feel good. Of course I would feel that way, and of course I would be afraid of it happening again. And how would I really? What do I want now? How would I like this to go? If I didn't have this fear, what would that look like for me?
Right.
And kind
I
of
love
moving
that. I
into
love
that
that
movement.
example that you gave. Yeah, I spoke up recently and someone yelled at me, and I just shut down. I can notice how I did what I did
Yeah,
with my hands and pulled my body
yeah,
in. That's how kind
exactly.
of how we do it, right? Well, what if my next move, now that I've experienced this and I'm aware of it, and I have had compassion with myself, and I have elevated myself again. Now I am getting ready to speak up again. What am I going to do if someone yells at me? I need to do this. I need to embrace the yell.
Mm.
I need to look at that person and say, thank you. I understand you don't agree with me. Can we have a conversation about this?
Yeah.
And don't blame the other person for yelling. That's just his or her way of responding. You have no control over that person. That person may continue to yell. And that's okay. Obviously you don't necessarily want to stick around if that's going to continue. And you could just say, well, thank you for your perspective. I'm going to step away from this for now. If you want to have a conversation about this, I'll be over here. Feel free to come on over when you're more settled down. Or something like that. You see, we do have the power to take care of ourselves. There's something else I want to say here. You were talking, you brought back the word safety again, how I can feel safe. It is true that by doing my own work on my own fear, I can create my own safety.
Yes.
But it's a flaw for me to believe that I have even the remotest power to keep you safe. Certainly, as a parent, my desire is to keep my kids safe. But I can only do that to a certain amount. And really, all I'm doing is protecting them. I'm not necessarily keeping them safe. I cannot make my child say, I feel safe when I'm with you. The child has to do that on his or her own. You see? And it's the same thing, whether it's a child or an adult or a group of people, whatever. If I have been charged with protecting them somehow, the best I can do is offer my protection. I cannot make those people feel safe, no matter what I do. So each of us has to do our own work on the fear that resides within us and decide how we're going to respond to it. Ultimately, that's what it boils down to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's true for all of our feelings is the mastery. This is life mastery, right? Self-mastery is self-sourcing love, safety, power, but whatever it is, having it, we're so trained to look outside of ourselves.
Right.
For those things.
That's the expert over there. Go listen to him or her. Yeah.
And sometimes we need support with that. We need experts or coaches or healers or what have you to help us get that awareness and understand the impacts of how we're being, right? Because certain things are hidden from our view. We have blind spots. We need help seeing that. And we know, I just wrote something about walking in your own authority, right? To me, this is an inner authority. Yes, we can ask for support and we can ask for help. And ultimately, it's really up to us to self-source whatever it is that we're wanting to change or the result that we desire. It's got to come from within. We can take advice all day long and not get the outcome that we're desiring because we're not a match to it. We're not aligned with it yet, right? And the misalignment is the fact that we're wanting someone to come and save us or come and fix us. And it's not about that. It's about going back to compassion. A compassionate disruptor is going to see you already as complete and capable and whole, and it's going to invite you into that. They're not going to feed you the answers. They're not going to make your life easy for you. They're not, and they're going to call you out on your stuff.
That's right.
You might not like it, and that's okay. You don't have to like it. Like, that's kind of the point, right? Is like, oh God, I had a coach tell me that she had a client and they had a particularly heightened coaching session, and that client told her to F off. And I was dumbfounded by this. This was a couple of years ago. So, I'm still I was in the process of learning all of this for myself and practicing this for myself. And I was like, oh my gosh, if somebody told me to F off, like, I think I would be hurt and triggered. And she, she just kind of took it in stride. And this is part of doing that work where you can say, yeah, right. Yeah, good, good. I'm glad you're telling me to F off. That means things are shifting and changing. And sure enough, she gave that client some time. And this is where the compassion is. Like, I see you. I see that this is painful for you. I see that you're working through this. I'll be here when you're ready. Right?
All right.
And sure enough, that client came back and they had a good laugh over it. But that's really a testament, I think, to both of them for really being willing to be in that discomfort and see it through to the other end.
I think that we don't need to wait for a coach to come along that we can tell to fuck off.
No,
we don't need to wait for that. We need to stand up sometimes and say that to the whole world. I'm done doing it the way you want me to do it. It's time for me to stand up and be me. And if you don't like it, well, yeah, that's your business. You don't have to like it, right?
Yeah.
What I have learned for myself is I tend to admire people the most when I see them standing in their true power. When I see them refusing to back down because somebody disagrees with them, or even somebody, they're not necessarily going to put themselves in harm's way as a result of, to stand up for themselves and stuff. But I find most often the people who are willing to do that, to stand in their true power, don't tend to take too much crap from anybody. Not because they're not able to take it, but because most people just don't give it to them. They realize this is a waste. I'm going to be, to coin another phrase, pissing in the wind. And so it's I love what you said about that. I think I've had a couple of clients say some pretty nasty things to me too. And I just say, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that probably was hard for you to say.
Yeah, imagine the courage to say that, right? Yeah. To someone, especially someone that we probably automatically think of it as being an authority, right?
But exactly. That's just
the truth is, we're an authority on ourselves, and so
right.
that's also a very, most likely, I wasn't there, but my guess is that it was a pretty raw and authentic response.
Of course.
It was honest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's, let's face it, that this is the problem with being a coach, by the way. The person that I'm working with often sees me as some kind of an expert and a pro or whatever. And I say, look, I want you to understand that I'm just a process expert. That's all I am. I don't know anything about you. You're the Gayle expert. You're the Bob expert. I'm just going to tell you what I see and what I experience. You can use that information any way you like. I hope it will help you. That would be my intention, is to make sure that what I'm telling you is not just something that, I'm saying to stroke your ego or to make you feel better or anything. I want you to know that it's coming from a place of what I observe with, I hope, as little judgment as possible.
Yeah.
That's how I try to make my relationship with my clients. I want them to know I am not the expert here. All I can do is help you find your own way to your own truth. That's what I do. So people who have coaches should keep that in mind. If your coach is always telling you what to do and you're always doing that, this is probably not the relationship you want to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I want to go back to something that you said. I can't remember exactly how you said it. I know for me, this whole idea of compassion, like I was really kind of not into this, kind of not into the whole compassion thing at the beginning, because I felt like it was a weakness. And I felt like it was something that this was on a subconscious level. And yet there was a knowing that like, this is the place where people take advantage of me. My kindness, my heart, my caring. This is how people take advantage of me. Right.
That's why they call it vulnerability, by the way.
Right. Exactly. And in working with coaches and, in studying this and practicing this in my life and in my business, it really isn't at all about being a doormat.
That's right.
It's actually about being clear. It's about being firm, being clear with your boundaries and your energy. I'm thinking of that Brene Brown quote from Atlas of the Heart, where she talks about boundaries are a prerequisite for compassion and empathy. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but when we're not clear where we end and where someone else begins, that's actually not compassion. It's not really disruption, in my opinion. It's certainly not compassionate disruption. It's enmeshment. And that's really what I came to understand is like, oh, what I'm experiencing is enmeshment. There's not a problem with my compassion. There's not a problem with, wanting to be open and trusting. And in fact, that's actually, like, let's see more of that in the world, The issue was enmeshment. It was a lack of boundaries. It was not knowing where I end and other people begin. It was getting hooked into other people's stories and carrying their pain for them. And that's codependent, it's enmeshment, it's whatever you want to call it. And so the clarity around that really helped shift my perspective on what it means to be compassionate. And really it's like, do no harm and take no BS.
I like that.
By
the way, I want to say something. There's nothing wrong with wanting to help someone or to take someone's pain away from them, to take away their suffering. I don't think there's anything wrong with that basic desire. I think that's
I agree with that. I think that's human. It's normal.
Yeah, I think for any normal human being who isn't psychopathic, that is a pretty natural response. Most of us have some degree of empathy, and we know what it's like to suffer. We don't like to suffer, so we want to help our friends not suffer too. That's a beautiful thing. And one of the things that I remind people about compassion, compassion really is empathy. You feel the empathy. You have a sense of what's going on, of what the other person is struggling with or suffering with. But there's associated with that, there's this desire to act. That's what compassion is. It brings in that desire to act. You can feel yourself being drawn to this person and wanting to help remove that suffering. That is the thing that people need to understand. You have to pause Now, unless this person is in a life-threatening situation and you need to act like right now, you can stop and you can say, hey, seems like you're struggling a little bit right now. Is there some way that I could support you? How can I help you? And if you want me to just stay here silently, that's fine. You just tell me. See, that is still compassion, even though I'm not actually doing anything.
Right.
And it's
And you're also
important.
respecting their
Yeah,
response. You're not
right.
then
And
going, but
remember,
you need to talk about it, but you need to do this. You need to, there's
exactly.
there's that too, right?
The struggle that they're going through. Think about your life, your own life. Every situation in your life, one way or another, you attracted it into your life. Now, why did you do that? Well, who knows? It's to experience some aspect of yourself. That's really the safest answer, I think. So if you're in the middle of something that looks really painful and horrible to somebody else, maybe you need to be there right now because that's part of your life journey. And it's not right for me to come along as a third party and say, oh my God, that poor guy, and try and yank you out of it. Not without first communicating with you. That's the whole point. Sometimes we have to go through these horrible struggles in order to get to the other side and know something more about ourselves that we couldn't have gotten without that experience. So I think compassion, the word compassion really means suffering with. That's what it means, to suffer with. So I think the way I work this is, all right, I'm here with you right now. I will do what I can to support you, but I'm not going to do anything until you give me permission to do so and you tell me precisely what it is you want. That's kind of how the conversation needs to go. Right? Now, if I can bring that kind of energy into my life, whatever is going on, I certainly can bring it to myself. But you talked earlier about experiencing more enmeshment than compassion. I didn't really. Maybe I had some of that too. That enmeshment. I don't really remember. But I do know that the idea of compassion was like a foreign term to me when I first heard about it. I mean, I've heard the word over the years, and I knew it was supposed to be something good, but I wasn't sure what it was. Right? And it wasn't until I was in a men's group meeting, watching another man going through some process, and because his issue was so closely related to my own, I felt like I was in that process with him. Mm-hmm. And as the facilitator was doing whatever he did, I felt myself doing that work. So there was a huge amount of empathy in that play. But what I saw was, this is what compassion is. I'm sitting here feeling what he's feeling and not necessarily doing anything about his work. I mean, I'm working on my own stuff. And that's when I began to understand the difference. So, yeah, I think the whole idea of compassion is a powerful, powerful force, and something I think we all have to experience firsthand in order to be able to bring it to other people.
Yeah, a term that continues to come into conversation, not a term, but like a phrase, a way of talking about this that I'm noticing in lots of conversations I'm having around this is, you mentioned, forgive me if I get it wrong, but you said something about like sitting in their suffering or sitting with them.
It's suffering
basically
with.
Basically what suffering means, yeah. With, right? Suffering with, and really, there's a distinction for me of compassion is being able to sit with others in their suffering, not suffering with others.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just that's where the term came from. Compassion. It's from Latin or something. Yeah, but I agree with you 100%. It's about being present, supportive, and loving without and maybe having a desire to help, but not necessarily doing anything about it unless and until you are requested to do so.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, in great coaching experiences in containers. Like I've had that experience too, where I've been in a group and somebody else is getting coached, and it's like, okay, I'm receiving this coaching too. And that's something that everybody participating agrees on. They've made an agreement to go through that process. And I'd love to talk a little bit about, like, how does that process look in the real world? Not that coaching isn't the real world, but what does that actually look like? If you're being a compassionate disruptor, just because that's part of who you are, it might look a little messy when you're being who you are in circles that have not necessarily made that agreement with you. And that's not to say that you don't, that you dim yourself and you don't show up as who you are, and you bend yourself in a million different ways in order to appease others. And I think it's worth sharing with your audience that you can still go out into the world and hold that energy and be compassionate and know that you just being you is going to have an impact. And even if that impact looks like people getting upset with you, people getting mad with you, people, having some things to say, that it's actually okay, because you being you is bringing people into different awarenesses.
Right.
And they might need some time to really get a grip on those awarenesses. There might be some inconvenient truths that are coming forward for them that they're not necessarily. It's not that you're going out and doing this on purpose. You're being you, and you're kind of shaking up their way of being.
Right. You mentioned earlier about the idea of boundaries and not knowing where one boundary ends and another one begins. One of the things that I've always thought is, well, how is a boundary different from a comfort zone?
See, okay, so for me, a boundary is getting really clear on what you're available for, what you're not available for.
Right.
Also getting really clear on who gets to, who or what gets to come into my space, who or what doesn't get to come into my space.
Right. But you see, the point I'm trying to make here is that if I have rigid boundaries, that's really not much different than a pretty rigid comfort zone. But in reality, what I have learned for myself is my boundaries are totally flexible. Right now in this moment, here is my yes. I'm willing to go this far in my yes. And beyond that is no. That's my current moment. Mm-hmm. 5 minutes from now, my yes might be way out here, or maybe it's even closer into my body. You see what I'm saying? So yeah. The boundary is kind of like a big sphere that surrounds my body, and it extends and expands and vibrates at different amounts in each direction. And if we remember that, you'll see that because I have this sphere here, my trying to come into connection with another person may be problematic if I have a rigid boundary, even if that's someone I'm maybe attracted to. Mm-hmm. So this is where you have to think about your boundaries as, okay, what am I really declaring here in my boundary? And the other thing that people don't seem to remember is, if we don't actually talk about our boundaries, then I may not realize I have violated your boundary until after I violated it.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we are curious and experimental people. So sometimes we'll push. We'll go and say, hey, I don't really kind of like that guy or that woman, and I want to get closer. And so the other person may say, well, I'm not at all interested. And all of a sudden you see the reaction of the body when the boundary has been violated. You know, the truth always comes out. It just, you can't really lie. Well, unless you're psychopathic, but that's pretty rare. But you see my point? So yes, we have to honor our boundaries and we have to honor each other's boundaries to the best of our ability. But we also have to remember that our boundaries are flexible, and what may be a boundary today may not be a boundary tomorrow. Something different might happen. So be flexible and be aware. And this is all part of that whole compassion piece. You know, how can you be compassionate if you're not aware? So you got to stay, you know, grounded with who you are. The other thing I wanted to say about this, who you are. You can be fully present and fully in your body, fully who you are, and you don't have to apologize to anyone. And you can do that without being in their face about it. Mm-hmm. See, and that's part of compassion too. I recognize that you may not like the way I show up. I'm okay with that. That is something that I have to be able to say to myself on a regular basis. I'm okay with the fact that you might not like the way I show up. And so I'm not gonna try and sugarcoat anything I say just to make you happy. I'm not gonna say things to deliberately hurt your feelings if I can avoid it, but I'm certainly not going to sugarcoat things, you know, just to please you. That's not who I am. So this is something that we have to be able to stand in our power and say and do without apology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that takes practice. It takes courage. It's not, I want to
It takes 70 years.
Yeah. Yeah, or 50, you know, but it takes however long it takes. Right.
I would love it if we could begin to teach our children that from an early age, rather than, you know, all this crap that we're teaching them about, oh, you got to watch out for somebody else who's going to hurt your feelings and all that crap. Forget it. You know, your feelings are not someone else's responsibility. Your feelings are your responsibility.
I got to tell you, I have had that. I have said that exact phrase to multiple family members. You know, so we're all learning. We're all on our journey. We're all in different places, and you know, that's part of why sometimes it gets a little messy, because sometimes I'm having that conversation with a teenager, or sometimes I'm having that conversation with somebody who's old.
Yep. Uh-oh. Gayle, I don't know if you're still there. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes. I did notice my connection.
You froze up there when you were talking about sharing this with family members or somebody older, and then you just kind of froze.
Great.
I don't know if that's what it's going to look like on the recording. We'll see.
Well, you know, somebody can have a good laugh.
I'll use that as the you know, the image.
Oh, yeah. That, well, you know, that people might get curious and say, what is this all about?
Right.
Oh gosh. Yeah, now I'm trying to recapture my train of thought. Yes.
You were talking about the other people aren't responsible for your feelings. People
are not responsible we are responsible for our own feelings.
That's right. Yeah.
We're responsible for our own feelings. And I love what you said about, you know, teaching kids this so that they don't have to learn it when they're our age, right?
That's right.
They don't have to. And that's certainly something that I strive to do with with my kids and my parenting. And I agree with you. I think that there's so much. It's hard. It's hard for kids to really know which end is up right now. I have a lot of compassion. I have a lot of compassion for growing up in today's world. And I'm a Gen Xer, so it wasn't so peaches and cream when I was a kid, and I don't think that it is for, I don't know, I could be wrong, but every generation has its own challenge, I think. But I completely agree with you. We have to be responsible for our own feelings. And the more that we're looking outside of ourselves, it just goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of learning how to self-source. The more that we're looking outside of ourselves, the more we're disempowering ourselves, the more disconnected we actually are from ourselves. We have it. It's all there. Sometimes we need a little help finding it and reclaiming it, but it's all there within us.
Yeah.
That love,
it brings
that
up a question for me. How can you possibly love yourself if you don't know where you are? If you're looking out there to find yourself, you're not going to find anything. You have to look in here, within your heart, within your soul. And I say within, I mean, I'm not sure that it's actually inside the body. I think it's kind of, when I say within, I mean, I'm trying to draw the attention into me and not into out there,
Right.
I think that's the distinction I'm trying to make. And so if you can learn to bring your attention inward and to know the truth of who you really are, you'll just naturally fall in love with yourself, and you'll start to feel that self-love that we're trying to create. And when you have self-love, I'm telling you, compassion just automatically follows. It just happens. So I think ultimately everything has to boil down to, first, knowing who you are, knowing the truth of who you are, the deepest possible level. And second, loving all of that, whatever it is. Because in the third place, what you're going to discover is all of that is the very same as all of that within somebody else, because we're all one. We're all the same energy, just manifesting in different forms. That's all it is. I used to think that was just a bumper sticker, but now I know from my own personal experience that it's absolutely true. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
I
agree.
Yeah, so we've been talking about this compassionate disruption. Given all that we have said so far, maybe now you can give us a clearer definition of what you think a compassionate disruptor is, and then recommend how people can become compassionate disruptors in their own life.
Yeah, well, I think I stand by the definition I gave. It's really, so I'll repeat it. To me, it's really someone who challenges themselves, who can challenge others in a loving and sensitive way, and in a way that invites people into new ways of thinking, new ways of being, new ways being empowering, more empowering ways, right? Like really being noticing, we talked about this, noticing the thoughts, the feelings, the patterns. And this is part of the process, right? How you can do this for yourself. Everybody can do this for themselves. Sometimes it's easier to do it with others to help reflect back to you. But really, you want to do this for yourself? It starts with the awareness. So you're noticing a thought pattern, or you're noticing a behavior pattern that's not really working for you anymore. That's a great place to start. Okay. So I notice I do this thing. It's not really working for me anymore. How is it not working for me anymore? What is the impact of that? How is that? Where in my life is it impacting me? And do I want to continue? Because sometimes, David, when I work with clients, we go to that place and they're ready to release it, they're ready to repurpose it, and sometimes there's still something else, and
Right.
they're not ready. And that can be okay too, right? And so
Mhm.
have compassion with yourself if the answer is, you know what, I'm not ready to make this. It's like I have the awareness and I see the impact, and I'm feeling like I'm not actually ready to go there just yet.
Right.
Like maybe some other things need to happen first. And that's okay too. And I think that, I don't know. I have been in situations where it was inferred that, it's an either or, like you have to make this change or you're doomed. And it's like, you can make that change on your
Oh
own
yes,
time.
the hell and brimstone kind of warning. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and when you're ready to make that change, when you get to that committed stage and you decide what you internally want, and your desire for that is greater than your fear around making that change, that's really when you can start to kind of go through that again, that exercise again, the awareness of the new way of being. This is how I really want to be. The impact of that, right? Well, how will that impact my life? And really connecting in and starting to live and lean into that new way of being.
Right.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I was thinking of the example of not wanting to change, and an image came to my mind about being overweight, being, let's say, 100 pounds overweight, and saying, well, it's not really that unhealthy. You know, I can get around, I can do what I have to do, I can, all this and so on and so on. And actually, I really enjoy my donuts and my ice cream. I mean, I get a lot of pleasure out of that. Okay, fair enough. That you maybe you do, maybe that is true. But the fact of the matter is, people who are 100 pounds overweight, that's a lot of weight, by the way. And some people are even more obese than that. And they justify their behavior by saying, oh, fat is the new healthy, or something like that. And so anybody who tries to suggest that they might want to lose weight is classified as fat phobic. So they're flipping it on me because I'm daring to suggest that maybe your reason for being unhappy has to do with the way you treat your body. Are you open to that possibility? If you want to be happy, and I mean truly happy, maybe one of the things you could do is start watching less TV and doing more walking outside. Enjoy one donut a day instead of 20. Work your way down bit by bit and notice what happens. Of course, you don't have to do anything. You can keep going with whatever you want to do if that's what you prefer. But if you're going to come to me for support and I see an obvious symptom of something that I think could be impacting your life, I'm going to talk about it, whether you want me to or not. So, of course, you don't have to work with me. You can go work with someone else who will choose not to talk about that in order to make you happy. But that's
Yeah,
not what you're paying people for.
I think that that's a big piece of it, is being willing to talk about the things that people aren't willing to talk about, right?
Exactly.
And doing that in a respectful way, and really, like I said before, honoring their experience and their valid, validating where they're at,
Right.
and also being willing to challenge whatever that is. Like, you gave a very specific example, and maybe it's, the thing that's going to shift them into commitment isn't, like, maybe it's not even the thing that we might think that it is, right? Like maybe health isn't the thing that's going to actually call them forward. Maybe it's some other desire, right? Like maybe they want to get in a relationship. Maybe that's the thing that's going to, and so part of that dance is honoring their experience, being respectful, asking those potent questions, not being afraid to go there and bring the topic up and say, look, this is what I'm noticing, and I hear you that you're okay with the donuts and that it actually brings you joy. So let's look at maybe some other things for now, right? And that doesn't mean that you let it go forever. Like maybe you come back and have that conversation when they're at a different stage of the journey.
Yeah, it ultimately has to be their idea.
Their idea, exactly. Yeah.
But if you plant the seed early, the idea will come back later.
Right. It's being willing to go there.
Right. But I think ultimately, if I wish to become a compassionate disruptor, one thing I believe I need to do is just be who I am and speak the truth as I see it to the best of my ability without trying to be in someone's face about it. I can speak what I feel is true, but I don't have to say it in a way that deliberately tries to put you down. I can do it compassionately.
Yes. I talk about being a bold and gentle leader in my work. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, that's nice.
And we have examples of this. I know we're kind of getting the end, but if you think of Martin Luther King, right? Like he's somebody that stands out to me as a bold and gentle, bold, yet gentle. Jesus, I know I'm always talking about Jesus on your shows, but again, right? Gentle, bold, not a doormat, but also not in your face.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, wow. We've had a really deep conversation about this topic. And I'm kind of pleasantly surprised of all the different subtopics that came up. And so I just want to thank you for being here again, Gayle. It's been absolutely fabulous. Are there any final words you'd like to share before I begin closing us out?
Let me feel into that a little bit. I think what I want to share is that there is a lot of disruption in our world right now. And part of what I feel, in my opinion, is going to carry us through is really learning to have grace for ourselves and have grace for others, and to be willing to have some really hard conversations about how we're being, and really deciding if how we're being feels in alignment with who we are. And I think every single person on this if every single person on this planet did that, we can get through this phase, this evolution of humanity, with a lot more compassion and a lot less divisiveness.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you again for being here today, Gayle. I've just really enjoyed our conversation. And my friends, think about it. Are you a compassionate disruptor? Do you challenge the status quo with love and empathy? If you create safe spaces and foster love and inspire others to break free from the limitations that hold them back, you might just be one. So embrace it, be it, and stand up that way. Thank you all for watching today's program. Remember, you can catch the recordings of this and every other episode on my website at lifemasterytv.com. And friends, I invite you to remember to practice my life mastery mantra every day. Simple, 3 lines. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I'm becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, my name is David McLeod. I'm your life mastery coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. And I'll see you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye for now.